Hi, welcome to singularIt training and welcome to this second video specifically about Vue.js project generated by JHipster. If you did not look the previous video, I would suggest you do it now. In this second video, we will take time to look at how a Vue.js application configure and start to be seen in your browser. Let's see now how that application gets loaded initially with the main TS file. The main TS file is the main application that will run when we start the application. It includes a lot of stuff. First, it imports some classes so we can create objects based on those classes. It imports some font awesome icon, which is a library to include some images, which are basically SVG images, sometimes font. So basically it loads those images. The application, it will load some view filter. The view filter is extra filter that can be used in the application to filter our data. Here is one interesting one. It's the router. What it does is that it loads the index under router. It imports the router as the object router. So basically the router is here and we have this index. The index under router has of course some imports, but what it does is that it first registers some event for the root, enter, leave, or update, and it defines a couple of pages. It creates a constant here for the home and error, which will be the component for home page and for error page. So the error we'll see would not be G404 HTML file. It will really be this error.view, which is included under core error and core home. We'll look at the core home a little bit later. So it used the router class and create a new router class which will be exported. And this one has some history. So basically we'll be able to do back, and it has some path. So the root means that the slash folder will be called home, and we'll use the component home that we just imported right here. For forbidden and not found, it will both use the component error, but with some different data. Here's meta. Meta is a way to add extra information into the route so we can check those data later on. After here, we have those three dots. The three dots means that everything under admin, entities, and pages will be added to this list. So if we look at the admin, we'll see that the admin, there's no specific component, it just starts with the root component and it just adds some new root, this admin docs, which will be named JHI docs component, which will show the JHI docs component. And we have a special meta here, which add authorities, a list of authorities that are required for the user to show this path. And there's a special code for that that was added by JHipster, because meta is pretty generic metadata. All those paths will be added to the existing one. Same thing for the entities. For each entity that we created, there was a path for space entity, which is the basic list, which show the component space event. We also have the space event new, which use the component space event update. And we also have the edit or update, the edit here. And this one, it includes the ID of the object to be updated. The edit and update are the same page, basically. When there's no ID, you just create a new page. When you edit it, you specify the ID. And the ID is part of the path. So the Vue router will be able to access directly this event using its ID. And they both use the same component. Finally, we have a view. And the view is a view detail only. So it's the space event detail component, still using the ID and the path. But this one, the view component, don't have editable components, it's only text field instead of text box that you can fit in. And we have the same formation. Finally, we have the pages, which is empty because we did not create any page using JHipster. We could use JHipster to create page for Vue.js, it's bundled in, and in which case JHipster will come up and find this JHipster needle and entity to router. And when you see those JHipster needle, It means that JHipster will come and look for that specific comment in the code to modify the file. So when you had page, when you had entities, JHipster will come back and search for this specific comment to be able to modify the data he has. So it's about that for router. Router will have a component that allows us to switch pages. We'll see that when we look at the entities, and when we look at the other component, we'll see how it can manage to switch to different page. But at that point, the job to initialize a router is done, and we have a router object that is available a little bit later. We have here this import star as config from config. It will import everything under config. It means variable, methods, anything, and will make them available in the object config. So whatever we have here under shared config, whatever we have in the config TS here, we'll be able to access it and use the methods. Same for Bootstrap Vue. We'll use it a little bit later on in the code. We also have some imports here for classes, so we can use them, some style sheet too, and our basic service, including space event. And you have here again this needle, so any new space mission, any object we have a service will be added here by JHipster. Next, we have this config.initView app. It will call the init view under config. Let's see what it does. Basically, it calls view and use view cookie, which is a library to manage cookie, Validate, which is a library to make validation inside Vue. So for texts that are too long, too short, required all those validation. We have some extra filters which are used, and by using the view use, it makes sure that the classes and the library is loaded only once. We can create multiple instances of the same object, but it will initialize the library only one time. We also have this setup Axios, which will send a callback method that does the log. So basically, it set up Axios. So in case of error, if the status is 403 or 401, 401 being that we did not send a token, but it was required to be authenticated, but was not, so we did not send the token. That's a 401. If we were authenticated, but we don't have access to the resource, in that case, it would be a 403, forbidden. The first one is not authenticated, and the second one is forbidden, in which case it will reject and write up something in the log. It's not bad that it writes in the log, because all those URL we call, they should already be authenticated, because otherwise we won't have access to the page itself. So that should not be a problem, because the page that use the service and call the endpoints are not visible if you're not already authenticated in the application. Then we have this init fort awesome, which basically loads in the library any icons that we want to use. If you want to use more of the Fort Awesome library, then you can add them there. There's pretty nice icons in there. And we have the init Bootstrap Vue, which will include all the components that can be reused from Bootstrap. Bootstrap being a kind of library that allows us to write down tables and part of the application, and Bootstrap Vue, the wrapper for Bootstrap or Vue. Next, we again use this Vue2 filter. So this one is kind of a duplicated. And we had some component in Vue. So we had the awesome icon, the item con, the sort indicator, a lot of component that will be available into our Vue application to show up icons or item cons, indication of sorting, and the infinite loading when we have a list of items. Next, we create a couple of components that will be reused across many of the application. We have this I18N, which is the translation, and we have this config, which makes the initialization. So it makes the initialization by using the Vue component. And when it creates the Vue component, it provides a couple of options. And the option it provides is, the main option it provides is to use a custom formatter. And if we look at the code of the custom formatter, it's a JHipster formatter, and they recreate the formatter to be able to do some specific handling. Probably the generation of the translation file is made automatically by the JHipster code already. So instead of modifying the generation and having to deal with a lot of issues, they prefer to simply fix the parsing. So in that case, they replace some component, remove some extra brace, and in that case, they are able to reuse the same message format. So it may be a little bit different from the standard Vue.js translation, but still human readable, so that's fair. Now, we also have this init Vue X store. Vue has a way to manage data, but there is extension to that. The standard way of using data in Vue is to have a component which include a data attribute, some methods, and some computed methods. The data attribute contains the data itself. The methods contains the method that can be called to modify the data. And the computed version is some method that can use to make the data visible in a different way, like prefix everything, strip out extra data, filter out values. So those are all computed methods. But there's extension. A first extension is the class component. In the class component, the data is simply attributes of the class. The methods are basic methods in the class, and the computed value are getter in the class. But there's also Vue.ex. Vue.ex replaces the data with a state. It replaces methods with action, and it replaces the computed with getters. And it also adds the mutation. Mutation being a way to modify the data and then apply the change as a block and commit the change after the mutation is performed completely. In other case, the way it works is that when you use a getter or computed or data into a Vue component, there is an event lister that is registered. So when the data or the state or the attribute of the class component change, it's reactive, and every component using them or a sibling or a construct using them will be updated. And those UX are component reusable across all the application. And that's why it's here. This store is the global store configuration. So what it does is that it creates a store with a couple of modules, the account store, the alert store, and the translation store. And now those normally should be imported here. Import account store, alert store, and translation store. And those stores are all loaded from our share config store over there. All those store here, account, alert, and translation are used. And that's how they get configured initially. They will be used in the application later on. Next, we have those services. Those services are global, mean that we want to use the same instance everywhere. We don't want to create multiple alert service because the alert, whatever the page you're in, is the same alert, it's the same tracker service, it's the same translation service, it's all the same, even if you switch pages. Same thing for login. So at that point, we'll create them here, and this will stay as constant for all the application. We have a specific router here, which is tied to the lifecycle of the router. So before each router navigation, we will receive a call including the route, all the route, from and next, which is the current route and the next navigation with the view. If there's no destination, will be sent to not found. And here we have a specific thing about our meta. It looks at the meta, and if there's some authority specified into the meta, it does an extra lookup. It looks at the authority and asks the account service to validate if the user has this authority. If it has the authority, good. But if the user don't have the authority, it will be redirected to forbidden. So that's the first check at the application level, at the Vue level. Of course, it's in JavaScript. So you could tweak the thing, go back and change the attributes and hack your way inside it and view the page. That's why it's important that the Spring Boot itself also have security enabled. So even if you are able to view the page, when you try to fetch the data, the Spring Boot will cause errors. So that's pretty important to keep the security at the Spring Boot level for real security, and at the application for commodity to just show what you should only see, no more. Finally, we have this view. This is the main component of our Vue app. It's where the magic takes place. The first thing we have in the view here, the brackets start with a lot of options when we create the object. The first option is the IL, and this one indicates where the application will be placed into the web page. At that point, we started adding component, creating JavaScript object, but we're still using that index page. And that index page currently has a Pacman running. So we run everything, and then the main indicate that the view should be tied to the component named app. It will take this div, clear it out completely, throw it away, and it will replace it with our new application, which will be built dynamically. The second part is the components. The main component is the app component, which is the app here on the side, the app.view, which is simply an application. It's the template with app, no ribbon. There's another, which is the nav bar from JHipster, which is the menu. And we have a container fluid with a JH card, which basically is the place where the Vue router will insert the component to be shown. Then we have this template. We'll say that, okay, we want to replace that app tag with the app tag from the app component, and we'll do it. We also include the router, which was configured before, and we include some provide component. Those provide component works with the inject annotation. When we have a component that has an inject annotation, it will take the component here and inject it into our child component. So the app is the first container, the top level container, the root of the tree. And under that tree, you have different component, and it's a tree. So when one branch in the tree just has to have a component injected, it will be taken from there. So it can provide those components. Of course, login service, tracker service, like I said before, are components that are common to everybody. So we want one instance, and the other one, they can be created there. There's nothing specific about them. So we have also the translation, and we have the global store. Those will become our master view where all the magic appear. Now we have replaced this component. The first thing in the app we have is that this router view here will have to be replaced. When we access the application, we'll access the application at the root level, which means that router will check for the component at the root level, which is the root, the slash. We'll check for the component home and use the component home here, which is defined, and we'll go to the component home. We have that home component, which by default is the page you see if you have a question using JHipster with a lot of links, home link. So that's basically the application you have. And we start to use Vue.js here to show up components. So we start with the v text, which is an indication that this text will be tied to home.title. So if I check in my translation here, the home will have home.title. So they're tied to this value. It will be replaced. We still have a value. I'll have to go back. We still have a default value, but it will be replaced by whatever is in the translation text. Next, we also have some if. If indicate that we are testing a value. So if you are authenticated and if you have a username, then you have this message about the your login as your username, and you have this username here, which is included. We also have this alert warning, which say that you're not logged in. So if you want to sign in, you just click here and you can log in. And when you click on that link, it will open the open login. And the open login is under the home component TS, the attached TypeScript to the home view component. So if you go like that, you will open login, which will fetch the login service. And the login service here is an injected component, which means that the login service we created in the view application at the top level is here as a login service getter. So we just call login service, and we have the login service, and we can do the login. And in our case, the login will probably redirect us to our OAuth server for login. So we'll be sent to Keycloak for login, and when we come back, we'll go back at the exact same page. So that's pretty much for the process. At that point, we have a page, it's loaded, the components are injected, the translation is there. The translation is part of the store, which means that if the language change, the store will be reloaded, and by magic, it will notify every component that are using the translation to show up labels, and all the labels in the application should reload automatically. Thanks for watching this second video. If you find the information useful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can get other videos. Thank you.